Hi, Chamber family. Thank you for joining us today for this Chamber Conversation series, one of them. I'm Isabelle Renault, President and CEO of the St. Johns County Chamber of Commerce. And today I have the pleasure to have a conversation with our new St. Johns County Administrator, Hunter Conrad. Hunter, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Isabelle. It's my pleasure to be with y'all.
It's a pleasure to have you as well. The first thing I want to discuss with you is our residents in St. Johns County and businesses are used to know what different agencies are at play when we have a hurricane. We all know, we kind of are used to it simply because we live in Florida. We know that the emergency center is in play, etc. When it's the case of a pandemic viral situation, can you tell us who are the agencies that are in play? Because I understand it's quite different,
Sure.
And we all need to understand that a little bit better.
It's a great question, and the information is getting skewed multiple different places, and people just don't understand because, as you said, historically when you have a hurricane or a wildfire back in '98, emergency management comes in with fire rescue and law enforcement, and there is this clear-cut path and order of the way things are done, and it's based on what's been done previously. This is totally different because in this situation you have the Department of Health, who is the lead agency. And so it's important to note that even the county's Department of Health is actually a state agency. The county's Department of Health is not St. Johns County, it's actually Florida Department of Health that is located in St. Johns County.
And I know that a lot of people don't know that, don't
That's
realize
right.
that.
That's right. There's a lot of people that aren't aware of that, but they're the lead agency here. So, and we'll kind of walk through this, but a lot of the decisions we make are based on the information we're being given by them. It's so different than what you typically see in your normal, what I'll consider local emergency, where you have a hurricane. The county leads that with your local law enforcement and fire rescue and in those areas. But in this situation, the Department of Health is leading, and they're partnering with private healthcare providers such as Flagler Health. A little bit outside of St. Johns County, you've got obviously Baptist, St. Vincent's, Mayo, all of those agencies. So in this situation, lead agency is Department of Health. They provide the information. The governor and the Surgeon General work together to push that information out to the local community for us to make the decisions. And then we work on the response from there. Obviously, as you know, the Emergency Operations Center and Emergency Management is set up. So you have emergency management, you have fire rescue, you have the school district, you have the city of St. Augustine Beach, beach police, beach rescue. So all of those agencies are working together, but we're following the lead of the Department of Health and the State Surgeon General.
Directly, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's very helpful to understand how this works and when you're looked into the action to be taken on. So appreciate that clarification there. Can you tell us so far what are the steps that the county has done to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus, and then is there any additional step that you anticipate? I know the situation is fluid, so it's a little bit hard to answer that question, but so far if you can tell us what has been done and what maybe you foresee coming up.
Sure. So a number of things that we've done thus far. We've had a number of public closings on public lands, such as parks. We're not issuing permits for people to gather at parks, but you can still go to the park. You can take your kids, you can go kick a soccer ball, you can go out. We've closed the amphitheater, as you know, for a couple weeks. Anything where there are large gatherings or there are recreational programs where there would be large gatherings on public land, we've closed those. As for anticipated future closures, as you said, which is so critical, it's so different than in a hurricane, is this information is changing by the minute. And we have access to information now 24/7, and so it's so difficult to delineate between what's truth, what's false. You see something on Facebook, you see something on Twitter, you see something here or there, and so trying to take that information and get it from the proper and the accurate resource. And right now the information we're trying to get to make our decisions is from the State Surgeon General and the governor.
Directly, yeah.
Future closures, things like that, what I could foresee doing is a potential, and we're working on this right now, of extension of our current closures. So the county's closures right now are through, I believe, the end of next week. And so I could see a 2-week extension of that. As everyone knows, the school district is closed, I believe, until the 15th or 17th of April. The governor's executive order was for 30 days. So I could see the closures we currently have in place continuing for another 2 weeks to be in lockstep with those two. As far as additional closures, as of right now where we sit, there wouldn't be any additional closures. It would be an extension of those. But I say that because the governor could come out. We're following the governor and the State Surgeon General because They have the information.
Yes.
And so they're pushing that down to us, and we're trying to be in step with him. If the governor comes out and closes other things, then obviously we'll support that measure because he's the one with the medical information. A lot of people have asked, well, how are you making your decisions? How are you getting there? What we're not doing is we're not responding to this group of people saying this and that group of people saying that, and we should do this or we should do that. That's not a deliberate, methodical approach because that is swayed based on emotion. We want to make these decisions considering businesses, people, livelihood, public safety, health, and welfare. But that's based on the information that the state surgeon general has. And so we're relying heavily on them to help guide us because this is not local stand-up emergency, hurricane hits St. Johns County and Duval County, and you respond and it doesn't affect the rest of the state. This is something that's affecting us globally. And so the best way for us to react is calm, steady, deliberate, methodical, and listening to those at the closest point of information.
And having the right data to make the decision. So that's critical as well. Since this is really the first time we're faced with the situation like this globally and us locally here, what so far in this process have you seen as the biggest challenges for the county government in facing this situation?
So one thing I alluded to just a second ago was knee-jerk responses. Everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, there's a large group of people that want you to do one thing or want you to do the other, and it's based on so much information that it's not coming from the people who are guiding us based on the information closest to the situation. So I use those two things together, the emotional response, and I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be responses. What I'm saying is we don't really know. We're making decisions based on the information that we're being given by the state and the federal government. The second is just how information is being spread. There is so much information in this 24/7 digital age that people take it and they run with it, and it's not accurate information. So the spread of misinformation, and most people aren't doing it intentionally. Let's be very clear.
You're right.
They
Sharing
see something.
is sharing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sharing like we're being helpful, but the reality is it's not accurate. And some of it may be, some of it may not be. So the biggest challenge we've had to overcome is learning that we have to communicate very differently in a digital age, and we have to communicate very differently in a situation such as this, because it's not a hurricane. It's not your standard. I've heard, hey, when is the county going to do a press conference and say, well, the reality is I can get up there and put people behind me and answer some questions, but I can't tell you about COVID-19. I can't tell you how long does it last, what it's going to do, what does this mean for the global economy. We don't know those questions. Even those, the state surgeon general and the National Institute of Health, they're still working through those. And so it's so different than what people are accustomed to. I would say that the most difficult position for government is that information and how we disseminate that information. It's completely changing the game from anything we've seen in the past.
You're right. I've seen a lot of sharing that sharing is caring, so a lot of people feel like sharing through Facebook and other social media is what they need to do. So what would you suggest for the public and businesses, what information they should look at as the value information that you as government also look at to make decision? I know the Florida Department of Health, CDC, is there, what should they follow on Facebook? What should they tag on their what should they like?
Well, what I would say is to try and, look, not everyone trusts the government. I certainly recognize that. But in this situation, I can tell you that the government is working, from what I've seen, at least locally, is working hard to put out the right information because we don't want people misled. And so as far as what they like or share, I'll leave that to the individual person. But I know that you can go to our website and you can get out all of the latest information. I know the Department of Health now has a dashboard that is set up so you can see how many cases are in each county, how many people have been tested. That information that people see on the Department of Health, it's the same information we're getting locally. And that's one thing I appreciate this opportunity because we're trying to combat this. Well, you're not keeping things, you're not telling us. And the reality is what you're seeing and hearing, like on the Department of Health dashboard and maybe on our website, is really the latest up-to-date information. We've gotten a lot of this of, well, why not do more? Why not tell more? And at this point, we don't want to push out bad information or misinformation. We know that it's constantly evolving and it's rapidly flowing. And so the best thing we can do is when we push out the information is to be right. And sometimes that's a little slower. I'd rather be right than fast. And we want to be fast, but we also want to be right.
I understand that's critical in this situation, absolutely. What is the role that you see the private sector can play really as a partner right now to help facilitate whatever you need and support support the government in this situation?
So where we are now, as you know, with the current closures throughout the city and the county on the restaurants, and we think highly, primarily in St. Johns County, we're a tourism county. There are some other things. We have agriculture that has slowed down over the years, but we have agriculture development and retail and tourism. Where I would say the private sector can play a significant role is supporting other measures in the private sector. So I won't give specifics or details. I'll leave those to the individual business owners because I don't want anybody to be painted in a box. Well, now the face of the county is saying we should do this, or the county government, I won't say me as the face, but county government as a whole is saying we should do this. The best thing we can do is be supportive. So specific measures, maybe helping other employees if you're going to stay open and you have the opportunity, maybe helping an employer or someone that wasn't able to stay open. From the county's perspective is pushing out the good information, us maintaining the relationship we have in the chamber so we can give you everything that we're getting and we can push it to you all to provide to the private sector. I recognize government is not the economy. The private sector is the economy, and we have to make sure that from a governmental standpoint, we don't intrude too far on that unless this crisis becomes more and we don't, based on information we don't currently have. So I would say most importantly, and we all know this, but is reiterating just communication is how can you all help us? How can we help you? And having that open dialogue to say, okay, Isabelle, here's what we need, or you call me and say, Hunter, here's what we need, and just being supportive of each other as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate our partnership surely in this situation, and we work really closely with your AUC as well. So if we look a little bit further down the road and we see the curve going down after I don't know, a few weeks, what are the resources that you think you will have in place or are available to ramp up the economy again after that? What do you foresee? And it may be early to ask that question, knowing that we're still trying to actually address the current situation. It's very fluid, but if you have some thoughts about that, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I would say to your second point where you said it being so early, it is so early. And what we see with a hurricane is you have this ramp up, a week or two, and we've experienced it multiple times, this steady ramp up, and then within a day, it's over. Now the economy recovers for a long period of time, but what you'll quickly see is businesses are back open. They're taking the plywood off of their windows and doors, and people are trying to get back to as normal as possible. We're in an environment and in a situation here. First of all, again, it's a medical crisis, and it's not medically driven. It's not their fault. They're having to respond with the overrun of hospitals, and we're not seeing that and experiencing it locally yet, but the potential of it. And so we're having to kind of wait and see how this plays out. But this could be slow for months. It could be, and in a week we have a really outbreak, and then it kind of flattens, and then it comes off. So we don't know. I can tell you from a governmental standpoint, what we're doing is looking at our fiscal priorities. Trying to keep government open and operating on essential things so that people can keep their other part of their lives as normal as possible. Services are going to dip like they are in every other industry. It won't be perfect, but what we want to do is provide as much normalcy for as long as we can based on the information that we're given. But we're looking through our fiscal priorities and then how we would get them ramped back up if this stops in a week, if it stops in 2 weeks, if it stops in a month. Normally, as you well know, government is the last to feel the impacts. So you guys feel it, the private sector will feel it really bad right now. And then sometimes they're able to turn, not always, but sometimes they're able to turn it around a little quicker. We won't feel as much now, but at the end, it's going to be, we're going to feel it 3 months because the revenues we'll start seeing them coming in and they drop. So our priority is really responding to how are we going to respond fiscally to these things that we know are coming, but that we won't see for 3 or 4 months. And it's really a similar problem that you all are going to have as well. How we see it comes in because if someone cuts an advertising contract with a local business, they feel that right now. Whereas the revenue that comes in from that, we're seeing that 3 months later. So it's just it's constantly evolving.
There is short-term and long-term impact for sure in this situation. And so when we're ready to ramp up the economy, and we also want to be there at some point really fast, how do you see the private sector supporting you in this process? Is it different than what we've done with Hurricane? Is there anything else that we could help provide support?
Sure. So I would say it's very similar to a hurricane. Based on what we know now, is supporting other local businesses because we want our local economy to survive. We want the local economy, the small businesses. We want all businesses to survive and thrive. But the best way is to be encouraging people to try to hire their employees back, to do what they can. I understand that's not going to be possible for all. But just like we want to in government, we want to try to keep business running as normal as possible. That's the same thing I would say to the private sector is once this passes as best as possible, and it's driven by the economy, it's driven by people willing to come into the restaurant or to the business and spend and purchase, is encouraging each other, especially within our own community, to support each other just like you've seen in the hurricanes. That's one great thing we know about St. Johns County businesses and people is they're very, very strong in supporting our local businesses, the local economy, and that's what I would say. As soon as we see these state and national regulations and recommendations lifted, is doing everything we can, and for those who maybe are a little more fortunate financially, to go and spend money in their local economy. We want to encourage those, especially who may not feel the effects quite as much. Spend some of that extra money that you have on your local economy. Help the waitress get back in. Help the cashier to be able to go back to work. That's what I would say is, as quickly as we can once this is over, is encourage people to go back and spend locally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have the last question I have for you. Okay. I think it's last but not least, and probably one of the most important, is I want to turn the camera for you to be able to address what would you like to say to our St. Johns County business community?
Sure. So I would tell the St. Johns County business community, we're here to support you. We know that this is very difficult times for you all and what you are dealing with, and that these are going to be impacts that you feel not just for days and weeks, but for potentially months, and who knows, even into the next year, depending on how long this goes, that you do have a partner in St. Johns County. We don't want to cripple business. We want to do everything we can to lift and ease those regulatory burdens that you may generally feel, and whatever we can do as a governmental agency to support you. We're all in this together. Yes, some of us work in government, some work in the private sector, but at the end of the day, most of us all live here, work here, and play here, and we want to help the economy get rolling as quickly as we can once this recovers.
Hunter Conrad, thank you so much for joining us
today,
Isabelle. And for being, we appreciate our relationship and being able to support what you're doing, and we appreciate the support you provide to the business community.
Thank you.
Chamber family, thank you for joining us today for the Chamber Conversation Series, and stay safe, stay informed.